Hi, my name is Arabella, I'm 29 years old, and if you had met me a year ago, when I was still smiling effortlessly and laughing as if there was not a single truly hard day in the world, you would probably have decided that I had a perfect life, and perhaps at that moment it really was not far from the truth, because I was married to my husband Gasper, this amazing, patient, a little absent-minded, but truly loving man with whom we lived together for 5 wonderful years, filled with quiet happiness, small worries, and thousands of such ordinary, but tearfully loved moments that are only truly felt when you lose them forever. We met in college, on a campus that still smelled of coffee from a vending machine, evenings with books in the library and youthful hope for a bright future, and I probably still can't believe how easily, naturally, as if by fate, our paths crossed. He was studying engineering then, with endless drawings, rulers, and programs that I understood nothing about, and I, more down to earth, was doing accounting, preferring the clarity of numbers and precise calculations to the chaos that the human heart often generates, and yet, despite our differences, such a connection was immediately established between us, as if we had always known each other, as if every conversation, every chance meeting in the cafeteria or on the stairs were pre-written in some invisible script of our future life. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. We got married almost immediately after graduating from university, without much thought and complicated ceremonies, simply because everything inside told me that this was the right decision, and, frankly speaking, it was the best decision I ever made, because even then I knew that no matter how many difficulties there would be, how many changes, with him by my side everything could be overcome, everything would make sense. Gasper quickly found a job in a construction company. He loved to build, design, erect something from scratch and see how a building was born from a pile of materials, as if a dream were coming to life, and I got a job in a modest accounting firm in the city center, where everything was so calm, predictable, and stable that it suited me perfectly, because every evening I returned home, to where our cute little house with a white picket fence was waiting for us, which we bought on credit. Yes, I know. It sounds trite, almost like from an advertising brochure. But believe me, there was its own genuine charm in it. Every weekend Gasper would find something to do in the yard. He would fix something, paint, plant new flowers or bushes. His hands were always covered in dirt, sometimes his face too, carelessly wiped with the back of his hand. But these little things contained so much life, so much real love for our shared nest that I never tired of admiring it from the kitchen window while making morning coffee. Lately we often talked about children, at first cautiously, as if testing the soil, but then more and more confidently, and although I was in no hurry, was not fully prepared for such responsibility, the way his eyes lit up at the mere thought of fatherhood, how he enthusiastically chose names, joked that our children would inherit my intelligence and, in his hopes, his height, all this filled my heart with something soft and warm, something that defies precise formulations. So, a month ago we went to visit Samuel, an old friend of Gasper's from college, with whom he once shared the same dorm room, and who had recently become a father. His son, little Tommy, was born just a few weeks ago, and Gasper couldn't wait to see him, to hold him in his arms, to ask him 100,000 questions about what it was like to be a father. The whole drive to their house, which was about 2 hours away, was filled with cheerful conversations, plans, and jokes. It was a beautiful day. Tommy was incredibly cute, with little fists and clear eyes, and Gasper, as if forgetting about everything in the world, spent almost the entire day rocking him in his arms, laughing with Samuel, sharing his expectations and, it seemed, already mentally imagining himself holding his own son in his arms. On the way back everything was still fine. We chatted, remembered funny stories from our student life. He joked that he would be the best father in the world because he would teach our children how to throw a football correctly, and I, laughing, said that then I would have to teach them how to fill out a tax return, and perhaps this was our magic, the ability to laugh even about serious things. But when we almost reached home, no more than 10 minutes remained before the turn to our street. The road suddenly became more slippery, wet after the rain that had passed earlier, although Gasper, as always, was extremely attentive, carefully slowing down before each turn, and I was almost dozing, lulled by the soft silence and the movement of the car, when suddenly everything changed in an instant. From around the turn, without warning, another car flew into our lane, Gasper swung the wheel sharply to avoid a collision. His reaction was instantaneous. I screamed, instinctively grabbing the belt, and then a terrible sound, the grinding of metal, a blow so strong that everything disappeared in a bright flash and silence, then a spin, blows, as if we were rolling through the air, and the last thing I felt was a sharp push. Later I was told that we crashed into a telephone pole, then darkness. When I came to, the pain was everywhere, even my breathing felt like sharp needles in my chest, and I didn't immediately understand where I was until I saw the sterile white ceiling, the lamps, the glare on the window, and the nurse leaning over me, who, noticing that I had come to, asked softly, with a forced smile, "Mrs. Donati, how are you feeling?" But the only thing I could whisper, with difficulty parting my lips, was, "Where is Gasper?" That was the first thing I asked. The nurse's face took on an expression that could not be mistaken for either sympathy or cautious hope, that deep, frozen sorrow that cannot be expressed in words because it hangs silently, like a thick fog before dawn, and so, without uttering a sound, she simply nodded and, turning, left the room, and a few minutes later Dr. Morelli came through the door, an elderly man with deep wrinkles on his face, graying, neatly styled hair and the seal of silent knowledge in his eyes, which had more than once informed people that someone's life was over forever. He stopped at the foot of my bed, looked at me with some kind of heavy, almost paternal sadness, and his voice, deep and muffled, sounded like a sentence from which there was no escape or hiding. "Mrs. Donati, I am very sorry, your husband did not survive the accident, he died instantly from the impact." I think I screamed again, not a scream of pain, not a scream of fear, but that primordial, animalistic cry that bursts from the very depths of the soul, when the body is still here, but the mind is already somewhere out there, in a place where everything has collapsed and turned to dust. I don't remember anything special after that moment, only how my body shook with sobs, how tears burned the skin on my cheeks, how everything inside was turned inside out from an unbearable, unthinkable loss, and only when the nurse came and administered a sedative, the pain, at least for a while, was replaced by emptiness. When I woke up again, or rather, returned to some semblance of consciousness where I could perceive words but not comprehend them, Dr. Morelli was sitting next to my bed, and with the same restrained sadness with which he had told me of my death, he began to tell me what had happened to me: a broken left arm, 3 broken ribs, a concussion, many small cuts and bruises, and, as he put it, "You were very lucky," at which I couldn't help but chuckle almost bitterly, because if anyone had told me earlier that surviving where Gasper had died was lucky, I would have laughed in their face, or simply walked on, not wanting to deal with such absurdity. Lucky, huh? The next day, 2 police officers came into the room, a man and a woman, dressed in plain civilian clothes but with that typical expression on their faces that comes from those who have seen lives broken too often. They spoke to me softly, respectfully, asking questions, asking me to describe my memories of how the accident began, how the car moved, and all the while I looked through them as if they were ghosts in someone else's dream. And then, when I was almost no longer listening, they told me the main thing. The driver of the car that crashed into us was drunk, and on Sunday afternoon, at 3 o'clock, he was completely intoxicated, not in control of the wheel or himself. He drove another mile after the collision before he hit a tree. He survived, he suffered minor injuries, and my husband, my beloved Gaspard, was dead. The whole day passed in a fog. I hardly talked to anyone, I didn't react, I didn't try to think. Everything was shrouded in a sticky veil in which there was no time, no light, no meaning. Nurses came to check on me, took my blood pressure, examined the bandages, asked standard questions, to which I answered with barely noticeable nods or shaking my head. Somewhere in the evening, a psychologist appeared, a young woman with glasses, with kind eyes and a soft voice, who introduced herself and tried to start a conversation, suggested breathing exercises, talked about grief, about how all feelings are acceptable, that pain is the path to healing. But her words were drowned out by the hum of my own consciousness, because all I could think about was that Gasper would never be able to become a father again, although he wanted it so much, that our children, whom we dreamed of, would never be born and would never know what an amazing person their father was. The next day, with all my strength left, I dialed my parents' number. I knew I had to tell them what had happened, because no matter how disappointed I'd been in them before, I desperately needed their help, their concern, just the human warmth that every child seemed to be able to count on. my mother answered almost immediately, her voice distracted, distant, as if she were preoccupied with something more important, something more urgent. "Hi, Mum, it's Arabella," I said. "Oh, hi, dear, how are you?" "I'm a little busy right now," she said. I took a deep breath, trying to find the strength to say the main thing. "Mum, Gaspard and I were in a car accident. He didn't survive. Gaspard is dead." There was absolute silence on the line for a few seconds, and I could almost hear her breathing. Then, "Oh, Arabella, that's terrible, we're so sorry." And that was it, just sorry, as if I were reporting the loss of an object, or at best a pet. I tightened my fingers on the phone. "Mom, I'm in the hospital. I can't do this alone. I need you and Dad to help me plan Gaspard's funeral. I can barely walk. I don't know how to organize everything." The answer came after a while, but the cold tone of her voice pierced like ice. "Well, Arabella, this is really bad timing. Emma just got a promotion at work, and we're throwing a huge party for her this weekend. We've been planning it for weeks." I froze. "Mom, my husband died. I need help with his funeral." "I understand, Arabella, but Emma worked so hard for that promotion. Doesn't Gaspard have parents and a sister, Wanda? They should be the ones doing this anyway." And then, a short beep, she simply hung up. I stared at my phone, not believing it was happening, not believing that my parents had chosen a party at this moment when my whole world had collapsed. An hour later, Luigi and Beatrice, Gaspar's parents, walked into the room with his sister, Wanda. We had always gotten along with them. They were so different from my family. They were warm, caring, empathetic, and when they walked in, everyone had tears in their eyes. Luigi hugged me gently, going around the sore side, and said, looking into my eyes, "Arabella, we're going to get through this together." Beatrice, barely holding back her sobs, took my hand and whispered, "Gaspard loved you so much. He always talked about you." Wanda silently took the clean clothes she'd brought from home from her bag and later helped me wash my hair in the hospital sink. "Don't worry about anything," she said. "We'll take care of everything. Just focus on getting better." I didn't tell them what my parents had said. I was too ashamed. It was too painful to admit that at the most difficult moment of my life, at the moment when every breath was a cutting pain, not only in my broken ribs, but in my heart, in my soul, in every corner of my being, my parents had turned away, as if I was asking them for something impossible, as if asking them to help bury the man I was going to spend my whole life with was something unreasonable and inconvenient. Gaspar's parents, heartbroken by the loss of their son, didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate, didn't look for reasons to shirk. They just took everything upon themselves, without waiting for me to fall into an even greater abyss. And this probably saved me, because if I had been left alone, I don't know if I would have coped at all. After they left, I lay in the hospital room, feeling the darkness gathering not outside but inside, a darkness as thick and viscous as tar that flowed through my veins instead of blood, and my thoughts were not only about Gaspard. Although every mention of his name in my head echoed with pain that took my breath away, but also about my family, about my parents who made a choice, and about my sister, who had always been the center of their world, even if that world was collapsing around them. Emma had always been given special attention, as if she were a fragile exhibit in a display case that needed to be cherished, protected from life, justified and supported, no matter what she had done, and I could forgive a lot, but this was different. It was about death, about irrevocable loss, and they behaved as if it were an inconvenience, an inappropriate pause in the series of joyful events that they had so carefully built around Emma. That night in the hospital, despite the medication and the fatigue, I couldn't sleep because my thoughts kept spinning like a broken record, images from my childhood popping up before my eyes, one after another, like frames from an old home video. Emma getting into trouble at school, her parents defending her to teachers, claiming that she simply wasn't getting the intellectual stimulation she needed, that her defiance was a sign of strong character and not a bad upbringing, and how I, on the contrary, brought home certificates and diplomas every time, got top marks, neatly filled out diaries and completed assignments ahead of schedule, only to hear a dry "well done" and see my certificate on the refrigerator disappear under receipts and laundry reminders. I tried my best to deserve their attention, but it was all in vain. For them, there was always Emma and her endless vacillations between failures and excuses. When it came time for her to go to college, her parents didn't hesitate to hire a counselor, pay for her prep classes, and get her into an expensive private university without even discussing who would pay for it, while I, who filled out my own applications and wrote my own motivational letters at night, got into a prestigious school on a full scholarship. But even then it was presented as a lesser achievement, because, in my father's words, Emma has character, she will make her own way. When she dropped out of school to find herself, her parents not only welcomed her back home, but allowed her to live there for 2 years rent-free, as if her failure were an act of inner strength, while I, who graduated with honors, got my first job and was told only, "When are you moving out? We want to convert your room into Emma's studio." Even on my wedding day, everything revolved around her. She was late for the ceremony because she was unhappy with her hair. She upstaged my dress with her bright outfit. She got drunk at the reception and gave a long, awkward toast in which she declared that she was proud of me, that I had finally found someone who could tolerate me. Gasper then squeezed my hand so hard that his knuckles turned white, but I asked him to ignore it, because, this is how everything runs in our family. And the worst thing was not even that, the worst was the way my parents found excuses over and over again. When she was fired from 3 jobs, the bosses did not understand her innovative approach. When she crashed her father's car while texting and driving, the other driver was to blame, because he should have looked more carefully. When she maxed out 2 credit cards on clothes and spa treatments, she deserved to be pampered after all she'd been through. And now, when I needed them most, they were too busy celebrating. Emma was busy with the promotion, the bonus, the party, and I was just burying my husband. The next few days in the hospital passed almost unnoticed, like a slow-motion dream, filled with white lights, the rustle of nurses' footsteps, and the silence broken by the whispers of those who were really there. Gasper's family came every day. Luigi and Beatrice brought home-cooked meals so that I would have something to eat, magazines, books, fresh flowers, and told me how the funeral was going. Without expecting me to say anything or make any decisions, Luigi called the funeral home, made arrangements with the church, discussed flowers, transportation, music, everything. Beatrice answered the phones, sent out invitations, organized the reception. Wanda, sweet, energetic, strong, helped me choose my clothes for the funeral, because I couldn't go shopping on my own. She even brought makeup, a new curling iron, and offered to help with my hair. "Gaspard would want you to look beautiful," she said, holding my hand. He always bragged about how beautiful his wife was. And then, 3 days before the funeral, I decided, despite everything, to give the family another chance, not because I believed in miracles, but because I still couldn't quite let go of the idea that maybe there was some humanity left in them. I wrote my mother a message, short but with all the details. "Gaspard's funeral is Thursday at 2 p.m. Street, Beatrice's church on Oak Street. I really hope you can be there. I need my family." The answer came 2 hours later. "Arabella, tomorrow we're leaving for Emma's bonus trip. She booked us all a week in Mexico with her promotion bonus. We can't cancel now. Emma worked so hard for this, and she deserves a celebration. Sorry, we'll miss her." Bonus trip to Mexico. While I was burying my husband, I called Emma immediately. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright and excited, like she was already picturing herself lying on the beach in the warm sun, a margarita in her hand and an endless stream of praise for her hard work from her mom and dad. "Arabella, Mom told me about Gasper. It's so sad, but you know what? I'm taking everyone to Cancun. My company gave me this huge bonus, and I wanted to do something special for the family," she said almost gleefully, as if my tragedy were just a footnote to her triumph. "Emma, Gasper's funeral is on Thursday. Could you please postpone the trip for a few days?" I asked, trying to remain calm, although a storm was already brewing inside. Her voice immediately turned cold, as if I had ruined her day. "Arabella, I don't change my plans. People die all the time, that's life, but I don't get promoted very often, and I want to celebrate with my mom and dad. They're so proud of me." I felt myself shaking, and I clutched the phone, whispering, almost in disbelief that I had to say it, "Emma, this is my husband we're talking about, your brother-in-law." She snorted, "Look, I barely knew Gaspard anyway, and postponing our trip isn't going to bring him back from the dead. Stop being so dramatic." I couldn't listen any longer. I hung up. I literally threw the phone across the room, and it hit the wall with a thud, sliding down, leaving a grayish mark on the white paint. In that moment, it hit me, a simple, searing truth I might have always known but refused to acknowledge. My family had never cared about me, not really. I was always a foil, a convenient foil, a function, someone whose existence made them feel better. My good grades, my stable job, my happy marriage, all of it was a convenient yardstick to compare Emma to justify her latest failure. But when I really needed them, when I couldn't even sit without pain, when my whole being screamed at loss, they couldn't even pretend to care. They weren't there to hold my hand, they weren't there to listen or just be, they weren't there. Instead, Cancun sand and cocktails under palm trees. The funeral was on a rainy Thursday morning, and cold drops fell from the gray sky, as if nature were trying to share my grief. The hospital gave me a wheelchair because my legs were still weak and sore. Gasper's family picked me up. Wanda carefully laid a blanket on the seat. Luigi offered his hand, helped me sit down. Beatrice held an umbrella. The church of Santa Maria was full of people. People came, approached, hugged me, said warm words. There were Gasper's colleagues, his boss, childhood friends, neighbors, distant relatives. They all came because they loved him, because he was one of those rare people who always helped, and not because he had to, but because his heart told him to. He remembered birthdays, offered to help with moving, brought food to sick neighbors, fixed fences and faucets, and never expected anything in return. I kept glancing toward the back of the church, hoping, almost praying, that maybe my parents had changed their minds and would come after all, but they never showed, not even that day, not even that moment. After the service, we went to the cemetery, where Wanda drove me closer to the grave. Luigi and Beatrice stood on either side, and I felt their hands on my shoulders as Gasper's wooden coffin slowly lowered into the cold earth. Wanda leaned toward me and whispered, "Arabella, where is your family? We thought they'd be here." I couldn't lie anymore. They went on vacation, to Mexico. Emma got a promotion, and they didn't want to miss her holiday. Luigi and Beatrice looked at each other, their faces paled, their eyes heavy in a way that words couldn't describe. Wanda shook her head and said, "Arabella, darling, your family has always been a little odd, but it's just not right, it's cruel." After the funeral, I spent another week in the hospital, recovering physically, because mentally, there was hardly any recovery. The doctors monitored the healing, checked my coordination, did CT scans, prescribed exercises, and every day, someone from Gasper's family came by. Luigi brought books and joked about his coaching abilities. Beatrice helped me with food and physical therapy, and Wanda just sat there, not saying a word, just was, and that was enough. When I was finally discharged, Luigi and Beatrice took me home, my home with Gasper, which was now silent, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Going into the house without him was the hardest thing in my life. Everything was just as it had been before that trip to Samuel's, the pillows on the couch, the mug in the sink, his shoes by the door, even the list on the refrigerator in his handwriting: milk, eggs, hand soap. Everything breathed him, everything reminded him, everything said, he was there, he lived, he loved. Wanda stayed with me that evening, helping me unpack my clothes and things. We cried, we were silent, we talked in fragments. We gave most of it to charity. He would have wanted that, but I kept his favorite flannel shirt, the one he always wore when he went out to plant, and his wedding ring, which was now in a small box in the top drawer. Luigi helped me sort through the paperwork, insurance claims, utility transfers, bank accounts, all those formalities that no one ever warns you about when you lose a spouse. But the real shock came later, when I met with Gasper's lawyer, Mr. Grassi, an older gentleman with a velvety voice and kind eyes who had once helped us buy the house and draw up our wills. I expected a standard life insurance policy and maybe half of the savings account we had been keeping for a rainy day, but Mr. Grassi, neatly laying out papers on the table, said, "Mrs. Donati, your husband was a very thoughtful man. He left everything to you, the house, all the savings accounts, the pension funds, the real estate, everything, but that's not all." I looked at him, not quite understanding. "Your husband also had a corporate life insurance policy from his employer. He's increased it several times over the years. Today, it's worth $1 million. You are the sole beneficiary." I nearly fell out of my chair. "A million? Are you serious?" I breathed out, because it sounded like something completely impossible. "Yes, ma'am, your husband was very concerned about providing you with financial security if anything were to happen to him. He also has a smaller policy of $50,000 that will cover funeral expenses." The words, spoken in Mr. Grassi's dry, formal, yet genuinely respectful tone, continued to ring in my ears as I walked out of his office, as if through a fog, and stood on the porch, trying to breathe deeply. Although the air seemed thicker and heavier than usual, I walked with a ringing emptiness under my feet, feeling neither alive nor dead, but simply existing in the space between loss and what was now called the future. Gaspard had never mentioned the exact amount of his insurance. He simply sometimes, especially in the evenings, when we lay next to each other and talked about everything and nothing, assured me that he had foreseen everything, if suddenly if ever, but I always brushed it off, asked him not to say such things, because it never occurred to me that one day this suddenly would actually happen. I knew he had insurance from his job, I knew he was considerate and thoughtful, but $1 million was more than I could ever have imagined, and you know what? I would have given everything, every last penny, every last broken copper, to hear him laugh at his own jokes again, to see him fall asleep with a book on his chest, to feel him kiss my temple softly when he thought I was asleep. Money, it meant nothing. When you lose the person you love most on earth, there is no amount of money that can fill the void he leaves behind. It wasn't compensation, it was a reminder that he was gone. I took 2 more weeks off to sort myself out, to gather the scattered pieces of my consciousness, to learn to breathe again, and then I went back to the accounting firm. My boss, with whom I had never been particularly close, was respectful and understanding, allowing me to return gradually, without pressure or deadlines. The job actually helped. It didn't heal or console, but it gave me structure, an anchor to which I could tie my days so that they wouldn't blur into a formless cycle of silence and loneliness. I immersed myself in numbers, spreadsheets, reports, clear, logical, predictable things, the opposite of the chaos raging inside me. For about a month, everything was relatively calm. I grieved, quietly, stubbornly, in my own way, but I was beginning to understand how to live alone. Gaspar's family continued to support me. They came, called, helped around the house, cared for me as if I were their own daughter. I went to psychologists, not always willingly, but over time I began to say more than 2 words. I lived, one day at a time. But one Saturday afternoon, everything changed. I was sitting in the living room with a book, not so much reading as letting my eyes skim the lines so as not to think, when I heard cars pulling up. I went to the window, my heart in a tight knot. My parents' sedan and Emma's shiny new SUV. I froze. They knocked, and, unsure of what to do, I opened the door. "Arabella, darling," my mother began, hugging me with that cold insincerity that was hard to miss. "How are you? We've been so worried about you." My father looked around the living room as if he were in an unfamiliar place, his eyes darting over shelves, walls, objects. Emma was the same way, picking up things, examining them without asking questions, as if she were on display. At one point, she picked up one of Gaspar's photography awards and said with a smile, "Wow, what a beautiful house, you're so lucky to have so much space." I didn't bother hiding my irritation. "What do you want?" I asked, not trying to be polite, because everything inside me told me that this was not a love visit. My mother sat down on the sofa, gently patting the pillow next to her, as if inviting a confidential conversation. "Can't we just visit our daughter? We'd like to check in on you, to see how you're coping with your loss." I looked her straight in the eye. "My loss? You mean Gaspar's death? The funeral you missed to go to Mexico?" The room went silent, heavy, like before a storm. Then Emma spoke, her voice almost hurt. "Arabella, we were in shock because of Gaspar. We didn't know how to react, that's why we left. We needed time to think it over. It was a lie, and we all knew it." I took a deep breath. "What do you really want?" I repeated. They looked at each other, and Mother cleared her throat and said with forced gentleness, "Well, Arabella, we heard from the Johnsons that you got a large insurance settlement after Gaspar died." The Johnsons were old neighbors of my parents, with whom they often shared news, and they were a kind of local mouthpiece. I had mentioned the insurance to Mrs. Johnson in conversation once, and apparently the information had quickly reached the ears of those who had no right to it. "We thought," Mother went on, "that perhaps you could help Emma. She's looking at apartments and needs money for a down payment. She needs, perhaps, half that amount, to buy a really nice place. $500,000, half the life insurance money from my husband, for whom I would give it all back in a heartbeat if it would bring him back." Emma stood there, not saying a word, but the look on her face, impatient, almost proud, said it all. And then, For the first time, my father spoke. Arabella, Emma has worked very hard for her promotion, she deserves a nice place to live, and you have more than enough money for the two of you. I looked at the three of them sitting in my living room. The same living room where Gasper and I had dreamed of the future, discussed how we would paint the walls if we ever had children, argued about whether we should get a cat, shared the quiet of the evenings and the easy laughter on Saturdays when it was drizzling outside and it was warm and safe inside. They were sitting on this couch, and looking at them, I suddenly realized that I didn't know them at all. These people with whom I shared a family name, with whom I grew up under the same roof, with whom I once seemed to be bound by affection, kinship, something important and unshakable, were now strangers to me. Get out, I said, almost whispering. Arabella, don't be selfish, my mother exclaimed, in whose voice there was a note of reproach mixed with hurt resentment. Emma is your sister. I threw up my head. Get out of my house, I screamed, no longer able to contain the anger that had been building up inside me since the first blow in my life, the one that took Gaspard. Everyone jumped up. Emma, looking at me with reproach and incomprehension, grabbed her handbag. Arabella, you are behaving completely unreasonably, we are a family, and a family helps each other. I stood there, clutching my hands to my chest, barely holding back tears, not from pain, no, not from pain anymore, but from rage. Where was my family when I needed help organizing Gasper's funeral? I asked, almost crying from the strain. Where were you when I was in the hospital, unable to get out of bed, not knowing how to breathe without him? Now you're only here because you think I have money that you can take away. They didn't answer, and they left. After they left, I sank down on that very sofa and burst into tears. I cried not from sadness, but from anger, from disappointment, from helplessness. For 2 hours straight, I sat, hugging my knees, unable to stop, because even after everything that had already happened, I still hoped that they were at least a little bit people. I thought that would be the end of it, that after such a conflict they would simply move on, realize how far they had gone, and give me peace. I thought they would be ashamed. How wrong I was. The next day the phone rang. My mother rang 6 times before I finally picked it up, tired of the annoying ringing. Arabella, we need to talk about this rationally, she began, in a tone that was simultaneously condescending and irritated. Emma really needs that money, and you're just being stubborn. I hung up without saying a word. A few minutes later Emma called. Arabella, I can't believe you're acting like this. I'm your sister, and I've never asked you for anything. It was a lie, a brazen, shameless lie, and I knew it. Emma had borrowed money from me countless times, for travel, for rent, for her dog's medical bills, for designer boots she claimed she needed for a job interview. Not once did she ever pay me back. I hung up. Then my father called. He didn't wait for me to pick up before leaving a long voicemail, expressing his disappointment. How selfish I was, he said, and even adding that Samuel, Gaspard's best friend, would be ashamed of me, and Gaspard himself would be ashamed of the way I treated my family. That voicemail angered me so much that I immediately blocked all their numbers. But they didn't give in. They started sending me messages from other people's phones, from friends, from distant relatives, from former colleagues. My Aunt Wanda, not Gaspar's sister, but my dad's sister, started sending me passive-aggressive messages, telling me to reconsider my position, to think things through and remember that family is sacred. I didn't respond to a single message. And then my mother decided to take a different approach. Publicly, she posted a long, manipulative, heartbreaking story on Facebook about how her dear daughter had collected the insurance money and was now refusing to help the family in their time of need. The post didn't mention Gaspar's death. It didn't mention how they'd refused to attend his funeral, how they'd traded their mourning for a vacation in Cancun. She wrote it as if I'd suddenly won the lottery and was being greedy by refusing to share with my sister in need. It's so hard, she wrote, to have your own child turn their back on your family. We raised Arabella better, but grief can cloud our judgment. Please pray for our family during this difficult time. The comments didn't take long to come. My cousins, relatives, friends from my parents' church, everyone started writing how shocked they were by my behavior, how they didn't expect this, and how I should do the right thing. Someone even wrote that Emma deserved help because she had always been creative and fragile. I watched all this for 2 days, feeling a burning indignation growing inside me, turning into rage. I kept quiet as long as I could, but finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I wrote my own post. No unnecessary drama, no flowery words, just the truth, point by point. I told how my parents refused to attend Gasper's funeral, how they went on vacation to Mexico instead of being there, how they didn't call me until they found out about the insurance money, how they came to my house demanding that I give half the money to Emma for the apartment. I attached screenshots with text where my mother writes that they are having a party to celebrate Emma's promotion, and that the funeral is at the wrong time, where Emma writes, "People die all the time, and that's no reason to give up small joys," where my father says that Gaspard would be ashamed of me. I attached everything, and I published it. The reaction was immediate, people were shocked, the comments came in an avalanche, but this time they were in my defense. Someone wrote, "I can't believe they swapped your husband's funeral for a holiday." Another, "Asking $500,000 from a grieving widow is just disgusting." And there were those who said outright, "You don't owe them anything, Arabella, they have shown their true colors, protect yourself." My mother's original post was deleted pretty quickly. Apparently she realized that the wave of public condemnation that she had caused herself was about to overwhelm her and drown out the entire fictional reality that she had so carefully constructed, trying to make me out to be heartless, greedy, and ungrateful. But screenshots of my post had already spread throughout the city, to relatives, to acquaintances, to old friends and new neighbors, and within a week even the most distant people, long lost in phone books and family albums, knew exactly what had happened. Those who had initially supported her wrote to me with apologies, explaining that they believed her words because they did not know the whole truth. Some even deleted their comments, but the trace in memory, mine and theirs, remained. 2 weeks later, I received a letter, a real email, sent to my personal email, written in an official style, as if it were a complaint from a client or business correspondence. No phone call, no text message. Just this cold, distant format. "Arabella, your public outburst has shamed this family beyond repair. Your father and I are outraged by your greed and your willingness to air private family matters on social media. Effective immediately, we are severing all ties with you. You are no longer welcome in our home, and we will no longer be in contact with you. We hope you are happy with your choice to value money over family. Don't wait for us at your deathbed, mother." I reread the letter several times, not believing that these words were actually written by the woman who gave birth to me, raised me, fed me, and took me to school. The irony was incredible. They broke up with me, accusing me of putting money before family, when it all started precisely because they wanted half the money I got when my husband died, money he had thoughtfully left me, money they had no moral or legal right to talk about. They were the ones who traded my pain for their comfort, who chose a vacation over sharing in my grief, and you know what? I felt relieved. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to worry about doing something wrong, about not living up to their expectations, about being in Emma's shadow again. I was free, not from them as people, but from the role they had imposed on me since childhood. Meanwhile, Gasper's family continued to be exactly who they had always been, kind, warm, understanding. When I told them about the Facebook drama and the letter I'd received, Beatrice shook her head, suppressing her outrage, and took my hand in hers, saying quietly, "Darling, you're better off without people like that in your life." Her voice was soft, but there was an ironclad conviction in it, and I knew she wasn't just sympathizing, she was speaking from experience, from love, from a genuine desire to spare me pain. It was then that I made the decision that every thought, every conversation, every evening alone had been leading up to. On Thanksgiving, 6 months after Gaspard's death, I invited his entire family to dinner. I prepared for the day with a special feeling, not just as a holiday, but as an opportunity to say thank you. I made Gaspard's favorite dish, Beatrice's roast turkey with stuffing, which he always praised even when I unsuccessfully overcooked the breast, and the green bean casserole he called the food of the gods. I set the table the way he liked it, with simple napkins, candles, and an old china set we'd once bought at a garage sale that he called royal. And when the meal was over, and only cups of coffee and slices of pumpkin pie remained on the table, I looked at these people, Luigi, Beatrice, and Wanda, and I knew it was time to say the main thing. "I've been thinking about the money Gaspar left behind," I began, feeling my nerves tightening inside. "I know he would want his family taken care of. I want to give you half of it, $500,000. Please accept it." At first, no one said a word, then Beatrice burst into tears, covering her face with a napkin. Luigi shook his head. "Arabella, we can't accept this. This money is yours. Gaspar wanted it for you. He would have approved." "I know," I replied, "but he loved you all." Very much, he said so every time you left us after dinner, he would have wanted to know that you were safe, that you were doing well. Please take it, not as a debt, not as an obligation, but as part of the love he left behind. It took time, much persuasion, and tears, but in the end they agreed. The following week we formalized everything through a lawyer, honestly, correctly, respectfully, and it was, perhaps, the first time since Gasper's death that I felt like I had done something that really made sense. That was 6 months ago. I'm doing well now. I still miss Gasper every day. There are evenings when I sit on the porch with a cup of tea and think how he would laugh if he saw me trying to fix the mailbox or repaint the fence. But I'm learning to be alone without feeling lonely. I kept my job because it helps me not to lose my rhythm, and I continue to go to my psychologist. We don't just talk about Gasper, but about life, about family, about new meanings. I live in the house that we bought together. I take care of him, about myself. I'm not ready for another relationship yet, maybe someday, but not now, and that's okay. I have enough money to live a quiet and dignified life for the rest of my days, but what's more important is that I have a real family, people who love me not for how much I earn, not for what I can do for you, but simply for who I am. Since I received that letter from my parents, they haven't contacted me. Sometimes I briefly wonder if Emma got her apartment, if her dream of decent housing has come true, but to be honest, I don't care anymore. Gasper's family has become my real family. We have dinner together every Sunday, exchange recipes, argue about who makes the best lasagna, discuss TV series. They invite me to all the holidays, to my nephew's birthdays, to graduation parties. Wanda calls me her daughter-in-law and means it, not out of politeness, but out of love. Luigi and Beatrice treat me like a daughter, as parents should treat their children, and I finally understood what a real family is, and it has nothing to do with blood. Write a comment what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.